I wanted to address some of the questions that I think are helpful to explain here. So, to our knowledge, the essay portion should remain as it has been, which has varied between an essay that is in response to either pictures or a poem or things that the students have been practicing in their classroom, or more traditional prompts as you've seen in the past. These are all prompts that students have been working on in their courses. So, to our knowledge, that essay portion should not change. The only thing that seems to have changed about it is that it became slightly faster, and that usually we recommend allocating an hour to it, and now they're telling us that it's about 40 minutes. However, that should not change too much, um, and tutors will cover kind of timing strategies and how to improve timing on that essay. Um, and the other major change is that each section is now timed separately. So, like I said, before you'd be given one giant packet and told you have 3 hours and you can allocate it any which way you want. And now one of the big changes is that each one is timed separately. And it seems like that it will be one packet given for the reading and writing portion, which will be then taken away, and then a math packet will be given with the two math sections.
I just want to add something with regard to the page numbers. The pages are pulled from the amended book file. They were not like repaginated, so just keep that in mind. So these are the pages, the 377 to 410. The pages are pulled from the amended book file. Go ahead, Dasha.
Just a quick question in regards to the reading and writing. If they're given as a single package, let's say you use 50 minutes for the reading comprehension, does that mean you have like, 60 minutes then for the writing, or do you know?
So our hope and anticipation is that that is the case, that the reading and writing will be given as one packet, and then you have that time together to allocate between the two, because our prior, understanding is that the reading should not take you 70 minutes. We would ideally have you spend about an hour on the reading and then allocate a little bit more time to the essay, but we don't know for sure. So we want to be prepared in either scenario. We want to be prepared where we have a full 70 minutes for the reading comp and 40 for the essay, or if we can use that time together for both sections.
And just one more quick question. Is there any chance the IC will be given on computer or paper? Like, is it paper or computer?
To our understanding, it is still on paper. We've
Yeah,
received
this
no.
is a paper test that they're licensing from ERB. ERB is the company that designs the exams. So this will be a paper test.
The
One
reading and the
one
writing,
question.
does it have to be done in order, or can you do the writing first and the reading second?
So it's our understanding that it will be given in a certain order. And so I guess students will be anticipated to do it that way. I want to hand it over to Ben to speak on this for a little bit. I think he has a better understanding of it.
Just one
Hi
other
guys.
question, Ben. One other question is in the math section, the QR and the mathematics achievement. Like, how will the students know that? Like, it says 40 minutes and 47 questions. So will that take each section away at that time, or the students have to divide the time amongst themselves because it's kind of worried about how short the time is for the section.
Yeah, I got you guys. So everyone's pretty much asking the same types of questions. So I'm just gonna quickly review the guidance from them from Hunter directly. And then we're gonna stop the Q&A because we're gonna need to go through all the slides that we prepared. And then at the end, you guys can ask the questions because pretty much it's the same questions over and over again. We're all in the same boat. We're all very frustrated with the current circumstance, and the kids have been studying for so long. So let me just give you some guidance on what's going on. So the chart that you see is something I wrote earlier, and this is how it's gonna go. The reading comprehension will be 70 minutes. The reading and the essay will be one booklet that they will receive in the beginning. So that means 70 minutes allocated to reading. That section will end, and then they will be taken to the writing section. At that point, they get 40 minutes. So it's very different from before, where you could start with the math, you could start with the reading, you could start with the essay. Very different, but that's just the guideline that they gave us now. So reading, 70 minutes, then 40 minutes essay. Once the reading portion is done, because the reading portion is created by Hunter itself. Once the reading portion is done, they're going to take away that booklet and they're going to give a separate Scantron, from my understanding, and a separate packet that's going to be math specific. And it's going to have the one section that is the quantitative reasoning, And they're going to have one section that is the mathematic achievements. The numbers here, I think, are correct. So once you're done with quantitative reasoning, they will close that section, which means you're just going to fast forward to the next section of the booklet, which will be the math achievement, and then you'll get the 40-minute allocation for the rest of the questions. So basically, from going from before where it was 3 hours, do whatever you want, it is now 3 hours and 5 minutes, and it's 4 different timed sections that will be administered, and then they're free to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else said, or can we proceed with the math?
Let's see, what else? Other than that, there were a lot of questions of families asking about what the cutoff situation will be. So keep in mind, it's year by year, it's very different, based on how students are performing. So in the end of the day, it'll still be the top 500 kids. So now I guess the math questions weigh a little bit less, whereas before it weighed a lot more. Just looking, there's a bunch of questions coming in.
I will
Everything
say
is going to be, yeah,
sorry, I
go
want
ahead.
to jump in to answer a couple of these questions. The essay will remain handwritten. So that's something, if you attended the writing webinars, I often talk about how handwriting matters as well to make sure that the essay is written legibly. Yeah, I want to answer that question. Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of questions per section, it varies because again, this is something that Hunter dictates, but reading will be anywhere between 42 to 50 questions. Writing, depending on the format that they pick, will either be 1 simple question or 2 questions. Quantitative reasoning, I believe, is 37 questions, and then the mathematical achievements is 47 questions. Something around that.
So Ben, you said about the weighted will be less, math will be weight less. Can you
Well, yeah, because well, keep
uh,
in mind if we compare from the before how it was to how it is now. Before there was only 30 math questions. Now we're looking at around 84 math questions. So it still comes out to the same amount of points. Sorry, it still
50.
comes out. Yeah, so it would be 50 points. So the 84 questions that we have now will still be scaled into 50 points. Same as before, there was 30 questions that scaled into 50 points.
so one question will be worth like less than a point essentially, or like something like that, right? Like
The scale is still for them to dictate, but yes, something like that, correct. We have a question that do we anticipate 5 paragraph? That really depends on the school. There have been years that they gave the kids a short passage to read, or a picture to read, or a poem to read, and it was 2 questions, and those were 1 paragraph each. And then last year, for example, they gave a prompt about an alien landing on the planet, and what non-electric item would you present? And that was a 4 to 5 paragraph essay. In this case, you're going to start in the order of which you see it in the chart. It's going to be reading first, then writing, then quantitative reasoning, then math. The minimum thresholds nobody knows because that's something that they dictate after they grade everyone. And no, there's no equal times. As I said, what you saw in the original chart that we shared, which by the way, everyone is going to receive in the coming week or 2, this notice from us because we're going to either mail it to you or you'll receive it in the in-person class, plus some additional materials that we have already compiled and set up for the kids.
Yes.
I have a parent asking about the cutoff. So keep in mind, the cutoff is not 65%, it's 65. Let's say if the cutoff this year is 65, then it's 65 scale score. It's not 65% of the test, correct? And then Francis just reshared the file, so you guys have. We're going to now hold off on all the Q&A because we need to get through all of our slides. And at the end of the presentation, we'll gladly answer the questions.
And this is the file the tutor created. This was announced Friday, 1 p.m. This was created, I think, by 5, 6 o'clock that day. So this really became high priority. Okay, are we good? So Dasha, you'll keep going.
Sure. So I think the purpose of this webinar, and Francis, if you're able to lock it potentially, is to really talk a little bit about what to expect on this new math portion and how it's similar and different from the old math portion. So I pulled some questions from the new ISEE just to give you a glimpse of what you might expect. And if your child is here with you, I would recommend take a look at these questions. So it does seem daunting that there are more questions to answer and that each question has less time, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of what some of them look like to show you that many questions can be solved in well under a minute. So this is, for example, number 6. In figure 1, the radius of the circle is 4. If a line segment is drawn inside the circle so it does not extend beyond the outer edge, the line segment could have any of the following lengths. So this question, for example, does not require you to do any
Dasha,
calculation.
can you make the image larger? And I'm just going to mute everyone. So Dasha, you'll unmute yourself in a minute. Okay, hold on.
Got it?
Okay, go ahead, Dasha.
Thank you. So yeah, just to go back to this question we were looking at, so if the line segment is drawn inside the circle so it does not extend beyond the outer edge, what is the possible length? So if you're working alongside us, you could take a look. So they're telling us that the radius is 4, and I wanted to demonstrate that this is a question that does not require any calculations. So they're saying the line segment could have any of the possible lengths. It could have a length of 4, right? The radius would obviously work. It could, and its diameter, right? As students have already learned, they've covered properties of circles. They know that the diameter would be a total of 8. So any length up to 8 would be covered here, which means that our only possible answer becomes A. This question, for example, would be
Why does it say radiuses? Sorry, is this question 13 you're talking about? Because you're saying something different.
I'm looking at question 6 over here on the left side, referring to this diagram of the circle over here.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm going to go through them one at a time. And so basically what we're looking at is that they're saying the radius is 4, so we know that the diameter is 8. This is something students have covered in the former Hunter math program as well. And if we know that the line does not extend beyond the outer edge, then any distance up to and including 8 can be drawn within this circle, right? And so 10 is the only possible answer. Now this question only required that students recognize that if a radius is 4, the diameter is 8, and therefore the highest number can be 8. That's a 10-second question. And this is an example of what we mean to show that questions on the ISEE tend to be a little bit easier. They tend not to be multi-step questions that require a lot of drawing out. Some of them do require more than one step, but majority of them do not, which is why students are able to solve them much quicker. And students who have been preparing for the former Hunter test have really been practicing a lot of trick questions, a lot of common traps that they might fall into. And this ISEE has a lot less. I'm now moving on to number 10 over here.
And I do want to share, this will be easier. You just have to become very familiar with these questions. So the test itself is easier. Dasha, don't you wish you took this test?
Yeah, this one would be a lot easier.
This is much easier than what it was. You just have to be more familiar with it. And I do want to share that this is definitely going to level the playing field a lot of students, because some students, like the kids who took RSM, for example, Russian School of Math, those kids had a competitive advantage, but a lot of kids who didn't take RSM didn't have it. So now these questions are much more straightforward and they're much clearer. This is more what you'll see in school. And you'll see it during Queller's winter break course, and you'll see it during Queller's 9-day cram course. So if you want to continue, this is a great opportunity to continue classes and more programs with us, which I hope I'm, encouraging everyone, because Dasha will be more than happy to work with your little bundles of joy over winter break. Okay, all right, so let's keep going.
Yeah, to keep going, another possible question is something like number 10. Now, I particularly chose this question because it refers to square roots, which is something that the old Hunter test didn't focus a lot on, but it's something that I believe most classes have covered at the Qualler programs. So this question is asking which number is closest to the square root of 180. Now this just requires students to know square roots. I highly recommend that students memorize all of the square roots all the squares up to 15. It makes it a lot easier. It's very easy to memorize. And so when we're looking at 180, this is also something that requires no calculation, something that can be done in your head, and really just requires you to think, okay, what square roots do I know that are near 180? Well, you know 12 squared, you know 13 squared, you know 14 squared, and you can tell that 10 squared is too low, that's 100, 18 squared is too high, so it has to be closer to 13. And 13 squared, 169, that's as close as it'll get. That's it. It's another 10-second question here. If you know your squares, that's it. Next question here is number 13. One thing that I also wanted to point out about the ISEE math here is that they do have a little bit more of these kind of shapes, diagrams, things like that, which we also have seen on the Hunter test, so this shouldn't be totally new, but it can present slightly differently, not to say that it is any harder. In figure 4, an empty wine glass is shown placed upside down, which shows all of the points where the glass touches the table. So this requires students to use their visualization skills and picture that there is a table under this wine glass to determine what parts of the wine glass touch the table. So you can try to visualize, I say, if I painted the rim and then I put it down upside down, what shape would it create? And so if you haven't already guessed, the answer here was B, because it would just be the circular bottom of the wine glass. Now they do try to trick you, for example, with A, because it looks like the shape is an oval, but that is just because of perspective. They also try to trick you to think that the entire circle will be shaded, but as we know, any glass is hollow, so if you put it down, you would not have the whole base covered. So that's another example. So to move on to slightly harder questions, and something I noticed about the ISEE in terms of timing is that it balances between questions that can take 10, 15 seconds, like the couple that we just looked at, to some questions that take a little bit more time. Whereas I think a lot of the former Hunter math section had pretty consistent, okay, each question will take you about 2 to 3 minutes, whereas here it can be more varied, which is totally okay, but I encourage students to practice, their timing and really check in with themselves every, say, 10, 15 minutes. All the questions do carry the same amount of weight, so I always say, go through if you want to speed through and do all the easy questions and then return to the hard ones, you can do it, but it also makes sense to do them chronologically. So, for example, number 18, which of the following equations best represents the relationship described by the table? Now, this might be a little bit new, and one of the newer topics that I think the Hunter program before did not cover as much is graphs and equations of a line. So the principle of y equals mx plus b is something that is, I think, new to this. But here we're covering trying to find the equation of the relationship between A and D. And if you're unfamiliar, I also think that there's ways to go around it, even if you haven't studied this type of question, which is you can always plug them in to check. So they're saying A is 6 times D. So this number is, for answer choice A, it's saying that this number over here is 6 times the number here, which we know just from the very first one simply can't be true. So we can cross that out. Now B, that applies, right? That 7 times D equals A. 7 times 1 is 7. But take a look at the second question. This no longer works. 2 times 7 is not 13. So B's got to go. That's not right. Is A 6 times D plus 1? Well, does it work for the first one? 6 times 1 is 6 plus 1 is 7. That works. Does it work for the second one? 2 times 6 is 12. 12 plus 1, 13. That actually works. And you can check for all of them, or I also recommend checking the first and the last one to see if the pattern was only something in the beginning or it really follows through to the end. So you could do 5 times 6 is 30, plus 1, 31. So this works. And of course, the same testing skills and practices apply to the new hunter as just the old hunter, which is always check all of the answer choices. Don't just prematurely circle an answer. So 4A equals 25D. So you could say 4 times 7 equals 25 times 1, and that's not true. So you can cross out D, and therefore you know your answer is C. Number 21 here, this one is pretty similar to what we've seen from the Hunter test. A small cube has side length of 2. A large cubic box can fit 8 of these small cubes with no extra space. How many cubes with side length 1 could fit in the large cubic box, leaving no extra space? So this is a type of question that would be familiar. It is a little bit more tricky. It does require that same visualization of understanding the cube structure and what we're doing with it. So it says that we have a cube with side length of 2, so we have 2, 2, 2. And a larger cube can fit 8 of these. And so this brings in the concept of volume, something that students have already studied and prepared. So we know the volume here is 2 times 2 times 2. That's 8. And we know that the large box can fit 8 of these. So we have 8 times 8, 64. The volume of our large box is 64. So how many cubes with side length of 1 will fit in there? Well, how many 1 by 1 by 1s fit? 64. This should be very familiar to students who have been preparing for the Hunter test thus far. The next thing I wanted to get to was the quantitative comparisons. Now, this is the section that is actually new to students. It's tested a slightly different way. There are no traditional A, B, C, D answer choices. So you're given 2 columns, and it says, given the information in each question, compare the quantity in column A to the quantity in column B, and choose if quantity A is bigger, B is bigger, they're equal, or D, the relationship cannot be determined. And this is a tricky type of question because of this daunting answer choice D of we don't know. And D is I always teach students, D is a pretty rare answer choice. It appears usually under 3 times per math section. And this portion, this quantitative comparison, only appears in quantitative reasoning, not in the mathematics achievement, and it's about half of the quantitative reasoning portion. So the first half is traditional multiple choice A, B, C, D. Then you have the second half of these comparisons. And then you have mathematics achievement, which goes back to the traditional A, B, C, D. And so some students find this a little bit harder because you can't work from answer choices, obviously. But as students have been preparing for the math section, we have all of the tutors teach strategies on how to answer all the math questions without necessarily using answer choices. So students have all the skills necessary to answer these questions. So this, looking at 22, for example, over here, this is a very classic PEMDAS question where you have to use your order of operations. So in column A, you can do the multiplication first. That's 20. And then you add 3 and 6, and you get 29. And in column B, you do the multiplication first. You get 15. And then you add 4, and you add 11. And you get 30. And so when you solve these 2 questions, you clearly see that B is bigger. So here you would bubble answer choice B. So my takeaway here is that the math did not get any harder. The way the question is posed is simply a little bit different. And so I think that all students need to do is familiarize themselves with these types of questions and take a couple of practice tests or do some practice problems, especially with these quantitative comparisons, which appear different. But the material itself is not much harder, or not harder at all, I would say. Probability is also a topic that I think is tested here more than was tested on the old Hunter test. So here's an example of a probability question. This is number 32, and I'm looking here on the right side of the screen. A fair coin has an equal probability of landing on heads or tails when it's flipped. A fair die has an equal probability of landing on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 when it is rolled. So now we have to compare the probability of A, flipping tails with a fair coin and then rolling a 3 with a fair die, or column B, the probability of rolling an even number and then rolling an odd number with a fair die. And so I believe probability is something that most classes have studied, at least the fundamentals of it. So the probability of flipping tails with a fair coin we know is 1/2. And then rolling a 3 with a fair die, that should be 1/6. Then here, probability of rolling an even number, that's 1/2, because there's 3 options out of 6 numbers. And then rolling an odd number with a fair die is also 1/2. And so when we combine the probabilities, we multiply our fractions. So 1/2 times 1/6 is 1/12. And here 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. Oh, sorry, not 14. That's 1/4. So column B is again bigger. And so B would be our answer. This question, again, not very long. It does seem like it's a little bit more reading, but the question itself is straightforward. There are not tricks. There's not multiple steps. And so that's why I think the ISEE portion is a little bit easier. I wanted to show an example of where the answer is D, where we can't find the answer. And that is over here in question 34. Column A says the price of a $50 sweater sold at X% off, and the price of a $40 sweater sold at Y% off. And so how do we know that we can find the answer here? Well, what students would do generally is probably plug in numbers or test possible answers. So for example, if we had a $50 sweater, let's say it was 50% off, that would make it $25. But if it was only 10% off, that would make it $45. Whereas our $40 sweater, if it was 50% off, it would be $20. And if it was only 10% off, it would be $36. And we don't know, since the X and the Y are different percentages, it's possible that it was saying 50% in column A, but 10% in column B. And so that would change if the numbers were reversed. And so that's an example where D is the answer. We don't have enough information. It's a rare case, but it happens. And it's something that I really want students to be prepared for. Now, a new topic, moving on to the question below, number 35. This is a new topic that I think students did not cover as much on the old Hunter test that I think will require the most preparation. Luckily, it's a very simple topic that only has one formula and can be learned relatively quickly. It says the slope of a line 5x plus 10y equals 12, and then the slope of a line that goes through 3, 4 and 6, 1. I won't go through the entirety of this question because it will require explaining a lot about the slopes, especially for students who have not yet learned it. But what I do think is great about it, that will make it easy to learn, is there's only one formula. Y equals mx plus b, where m is our slope. Now I've seen this topic tested here a couple of different ways. They may give you a graph that will ask you to find the slope. They may give you 2 points to find the slope. Here we're being asked to compare the slopes from 2 different equations, but they all come down to really knowing this one formula. And so once students learn this formula, which I have no doubt they will cover quickly in their class, they'll be able to answer all of these questions. But that is just to preview you on what may be new or unfamiliar on this test. Now, moving on to math achievement and show you a couple other question types that you may see here. As I mentioned, the math achievement portion, it goes back to the traditional A, B, C, D answer choices, and generally is very similar to the old Hunter math problems, but a little bit easier. So to look at some of these examples. I think I chose number 7 here because I found it to be very similar to some of the geometry problems that students have solved on the former test. In figure 1, EFGH is a square. What is the area of the unshaded region? And this is probably one of the harder quote-unquote questions here because it is more than one step. But I'm sure students from the old Hunter prep have solved far harder questions. So how do we get the unshaded region here? Well, the easiest way to do it, and I always teach my students to create a plan before you answer a math question, right? Game plan. How are we going to do this? Before I get into the numbers and before I get into the math, what am I even doing? And by looking at this graph, I think the easiest way for me to answer this question is to first find the area of the total square and subtract the shaded portions, because those I think I have a better understanding of, because they are regular triangles for which I already know the lengths and widths. So my game plan is to find the three triangles on the outside that are shaded, find the total area of the square, and subtract. So let's do that. So this is the only one that doesn't have a length added, so and this one as well. So I'll label those. And those are both 8. So, and then you will have space, whether it's scrap paper or in the booklet. So you'll be able to write this all out. So I'll write triangle 1. I'll use the top one, that's 4 by 4, divided by 2, that's 4. My triangle 2 is the same as triangle 3, but it's 4 by 8. And don't forget to divide by 2, that's 16. Triangle 3, again, 4 by 8 divided by 2, that's also 16. So the total, 16 plus 16 plus 4, I believe that's 36. And then the box, the bigger box we know is an 8 by 8. That's 64. And then the unshaded, 64 minus 36. And I believe that should give us 28. Did I do that right? No, sorry. This should be 8.
Is it 4 times 4 over 2?
Yeah.
That
Good catch. Thanks for getting me there. So this, now we're going to fix this. This should be 40. I'm doing this in real time alongside with you, so apologies, bear with me. And so our answer should be here 24. Now this really mirrors what students have been doing in their Hunter prep all along, right? Slightly more than one-step questions, but this is an example of what I think is a harder question here. Not every question will look like this. And thank you to those who caught my math error there. Okay, that's that. Moving on to number 12 over here on the right. This one I wanted to show because I think this presents another topic that I mentioned is prevalent here, which is graphs and data plots. So the question here is, Lisa counted the number of people canoeing on a river depending on the day's temperature on 15 separate occasions. The scatter plot below represents the data she collected. According to this information, approximately what temperature would you expect if 4 people are canoeing on the river? So what this question is really asking, and this is something I also like to cover in my classes, of figuring out what's the point of the question? What do they really want to know? Here they want to know if you can read what this graph is. They tell us it's a scatter plot. What's a scatter plot, right? That's the first thing we need to know. And a scatter plot means, excuse me, that it's a graph that has, well, here we have temperature and people, and it has all the points of different data collected. Now you can see by looking at it, there's a bit of a trend line. That is something that if there's a scatter plot, I encourage students to draw in for themselves, because what the question, excuse me, what the question is asking us is going to be to estimate. It says estimate approximately what the temperature if 4 people. So if it's 4 people, we're gonna be here. And so where does it intersect? Around 65. And so 65 is between 60 and 70. Our answer is B. Now, for students that are unfamiliar with scatter plots or who may not have seen these types of graphs before, what might be unfamiliar is you can say, well, what do you mean? There are 2 points already where there were 4 people, one at 60 and one at 70. Shouldn't that be the answer? In this case, it actually fits in really well, and that is also the answer. But in other cases, we must that it will not always be the case because scatter plots have outliers. So you have to use the trend line. So I try to make the association that if there's a scatter plot, there should be a trend line. And I just remember that and use it every time. So one thing to become a little bit more familiar with perhaps is different types of graphs and different ways that data can be presented. Yes, here just in my rough drawing, I am assuming that the trend line goes through 0. It doesn't have to. I also, for this question, really only needed it to go through this portion around 4. So as long as I can catch that, that's really all that matters here. Okay. Just another moment here, and then I will move on to the next. I wanted to include these questions over here to show you some of the quote-unquote easier questions and why the timing here is not as much of an issue or as scary as it might appear. Number 18, what kind of quadrilateral is this? Students know this right away. No math, no calculations, nothing. We know, hopefully from your review of shapes, this is a parallelogram. We know that squares and rectangles have right angles. We know that a rhombus has 4 equal sides. So this is a parallelogram. This is a 5-10 second question. This is where we can make up time and why we have less time per question. 19. What is the value of the expression? 3/4 plus 0.21 plus 1.17 plus 1/10. This is relatively simple addition. Now I think that because we have a decimal here like 1.17, it is probably easier to convert all of these to decimals. So 0.75 plus 0.21 is 1.17.
知道，我在剩饭了怎么办？
Plus 0.1. And then you can just add these up and you would get 2.23. That would be C. One strategy that I also like to show is that this test is riddled with shortcuts. And that is something that we also recall from the old Hunter test, but I find it very prominent here and very helpful with timing. So what is my shortcut here? My shortcut here would be to look at the hundredths place because that can really narrow down my answers. So my hundredths place, I'd be adding 0, 7, 1, and 5. And I know that that's going to end in a 3. So because I know that's going to end in a 3, I get rid of this. I know it's not a repeating decimal because all of these are not repeating decimals. So I'm down to 2 answer choices. And even without doing any math, I know that this is going to be this is going to be close to 1, and this is more than 1. So my answer has to be more than 2. So the more you practice these questions, the more you can have shortcuts of, I didn't actually need to do the addition here. I can look at some of the patterns and recognize that my answer is going to end in a 3, and it's going to be more than 1, or rather more than 2. So it has to be C regardless. So again, question that should take about 30 seconds or less. 24. Moving on to the question on the right here. The figure below shows 2 similar triangles. This is, again, something that students have already covered in the math prep for the former Hunter test. What are similar triangles? Similar triangles have sides that are in proportion and have angles that are the same. So what is the value of x? If these triangles are similar and these angles are the same, then the other angles are also in proportion, are also the same. So that means that this top angle must also be 120. And we also have already learned that the angles in a triangle add up to 180. So 30 plus 120 plus x equals 180. And so that leaves us with x is 30. This is something that students can probably do in their head, right? I'm giving it a little bit more, I'm writing out a little bit more and speaking more to it to explain it. But if I were doing this in my head, I would say, okay, similar triangles, angles are the same, they add up to 180. 30 plus 20 plus what is 180? 30. And that's it. And I would be done with this section. So this is an example of some of the questions that are a lot faster. And there's plenty of them for reference. This is not just 3 that are lucky. There are many like this. Another 2 questions that I wanted to show. 34. The figure below shows the first 5 elements of a dot pattern. Patterns are something that are also very familiar to us from the old Hunter portion. What is the 6th element of this pattern? Now, I will say that the patterns here I find to be much easier and simpler. So what happens here? We add 1 dot each time. They also try to trick us a lot less on this test. So in Hunter, you might have seen questions that will say, like, here's the first 5 elements of the pattern. Find the 76th, find the 76th part of this pattern. Here, they're just asking us for the next one. So if you don't have to do all of, a lot more strategic thinking ahead, it's really just asking you for the next one. Which here you should be able to find just by looking at it. It went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know there's going to be 6 dots. We know that they've been adding kind of horizontally after each 3. So the next dot is over here. And that's C. That's it. So again, this is a question that could take 10, 15, 30 seconds to do. And that allows more time for a question like 35. In the figure below, the centers of 4 identical circles form the corners of a square. The radius, okay, a good question I know a couple of people asked here, why not B? Why not have added the next dot here at the bottom? And my answer to that is there is nothing in the prior pattern to suggest that that is where it would continue. We see that the pattern adds, well, we know that we're adding 1 dot. So anything that doesn't have 6 dots has got to go. So A and D are out. Now, I know that we're then choosing between B and C. But it seems like if the pattern is going just simply across to add one, they added one to the right. We're just adding horizontally. Now we might start overthinking these questions because we're used to the more complicated patterns of the old Hunter math, but here they're simpler. If we're just adding one to the right, we're just adding one to the right, and that's it. But good questions. And lastly here, number 35, I'm moving to the question on the right side of the board. In the figure below, the center of 4 identical circles form the corners of a square. The radius of each circle is 2 centimeters. What is the area of the shaded region? This I find similar to the old Hunter test. This does require more than one step potentially. So what do? We kind of approach it like we did in the past, which is create our game plan. What are we going to do? We have a shaded region that looks like this diamond star-shaped thing. Do we know how to find the area of this shape? No. So what we know is that it's going to be some kind of combination of shapes that we already know. So if we look at it, give yourself a couple of seconds, think, what shapes can make this diamond? And the way I see it, and the way I ask my students to see it is, what's our game plan? My game plan is, I think it's going to be the square minus 4 of these quarters of the circles. Now it takes a little bit of visualization, and like I said, this test has a lot of visualization questions. So this is what I mean by the quarter of the circle. If I take the square and I subtract these 4 quarters, I'll get this star shape in the middle, right? So now we have to do it. We know that each radius is 2. So we always like to label. 2's all around. So it might be easiest to first find the area of the square, so that each side is 4. So 4 by 4 is 16. And funny enough, oh, sorry, that's a typo. It's not 15, it's 16. Now, if anyone looks carefully at this, I already know the answer. How? If I know that my square is 16 and I know that I'm subtracting something from it, there's only one answer here that is 16 minus something. Now I wouldn't, blindly circle it and move on unless this is my last question. I'm running out of time. But the way you would keep doing it is, okay, I would probably already know it's C, but of course I'm going to prove it. How do I find the quarter of a circle? Well, I already know the area of a circle is pi r squared. The radius here for each of these is 2. So it's pi times 2 squared. It's 4 pi. And we're looking for a quarter of each of these circles. So we divide it by 4. So that means that each quarter is 1 pi. But then I have 4 of them, so it's back to 4 pi. And so my final answer is 16 minus 4 pi. This is very similar to the types of questions that we saw in the old Hunter test. Okay, so yeah, for those of you who said it was C, like I said, we knew off the bat it was C, and then we proved that it was C. And that is how I would like to generally approach these ISEE questions. Okay, these are the questions that I wanted to present to you. I would like to open it up to questions, but can we keep questions in the chat and I'll address them chronologically rather than having everyone speak over each other just for organization purposes. And I'm happy to go back to any of the questions we covered if there's any questions here. And thank you all for tuning in. And I wish everyone good luck on this test. And I want to just, assure everyone of their worries that we will cover everything in the classes. This meeting has been recorded, and I believe that the recording will be shared.
It's like all over. She asked like, oh, is there any questions and stuff?
if we want to go back to the other question 35, yeah, I'll solve this one. I'll solve this one quickly for those of you who do follow it. For students where this seems brand new, do not worry. It may seem complicated at first, but once you learn the very simple principles behind it, it will become a lot easier. So the first one says 5x plus 10y equals 12. And we know that to get the slope of a line, we want it to be in y equals mx plus b format. So we want to isolate for y here. So what I would do is I would subtract 5x from both sides and say 10 equals 12
You're gone.
minus 5x. Oh, sorry, 10y.
Already done this.
And to isolate y by itself, we have to divide both sides by 10. And so that would be 12 over 10 minus, well, 5 over 10 would be 1/2, so minus 1/2 x. So our slope, it's always the number that's in front of the x, which in this case is negative 1/2. So that would be the slope of the first one. For the second one, it's a slope of a line that goes through 3, 4 and 6, 1. So we know that this is also a negative slope. So we can't use a shortcut of knowing, oh, one of them is positive, the other is negative, so that would be too easy. But let me do this, 3, 4, 6, 1. And to find the slope from 2 points, you would do the changes in y minus over the change in x. So the change in y's, which is the second number in each of the coordinates, 4 minus 1, divided by 3 minus 6. And that gives us negative 3 that actually is 12. And then 3 minus 6 is negative 3. So this means that the slope, sorry, 4 minus 1 is positive 3. 3 minus 6 is negative 3, so our answer here is negative 1. And so our slope, we're comparing negative 1/2 to negative 1, and negative 1/2 is bigger or more positive than negative 1, so our answer here would have been A. So for those who are following along, and if you are familiar with slopes, that's how you would solve this one. So I'll leave you with that. I'll take a look at some of the other questions here. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Someone asked about the question with the probability and the dice, so there's that one up again. This new material will be covered in the remaining weeks of the current classes. So I believe students will be provided new materials. I think Ben and Francis spoke to that part. But we are working hard to make sure that students are prepared for the new test in their classes as they keep going. And definitely it will be incorporated in the classes that Francis spoke about earlier, about the winter break class and the January crunch class and so forth. And we'll have more webinars, and I encourage you to tune in with your child to work on these questions alongside me. I think it's very helpful practice, and it's a good time to ask questions.
Hi, I just want to ask, there will be a few more sessions coming up, right? If we started in September, I think we still have a couple remaining classes. Would the new math be taught in the remaining classes? And then the test coming up, and then the test that they're taking, would they be using the new math or the old math?
So as I mentioned, from here on out, in the classes, they will be covering the new math. It makes sense, in preparation for the upcoming test to be working on the new math material. I don't know when students are taking in the current courses, when exactly they're taking their new tests and whether or not the new math will be prepared in time. But I know that Queller is working on a very working very diligently to get this, material prepared. It takes time to incorporate into the test, but we're doing the best that we can to have it ready. The ISEE
Dasha,
math
can
here
you
is middle
share?
level.
Thank you. Dasha, can you share what I just put into the chat?
The winter break.
Yeah.
So this is the winter break course. This one should have the new exams with the new math already implemented.
I have it.
Yes,
have it.
to my
Okay,
understanding,
do you see it? Do you see it from my screen?
I'm sharing screen with the winter break course up. Do you want me to stop sharing and for you to start sharing?
Yeah, sure.
To answer the couple of questions in the meantime that I see in the chat, there should be to our understanding, no changes to the style of the reading question. So our material that we've been preparing with should be the same. And same with the essays, as we've seen the last couple of years. Francis, I stopped sharing, so you're welcome to start.
Sorry, did you say is it middle level ICE or upper level ICE?
Middle.
Middle level. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a question. Like these materials will be sent home with the kid, with the student, the one you shared to us?
Francis, can you speak to that?
Okay, Dasha, I'm off the screen share. The material, we've delivered some material already to families, but we have provided a link, and the link, we want you to download this link of materials. So this link specifically, we want you to download.
Okay. So whatever shared that today now, like Dasha was explaining a few questions, right? So we have to download and take a print and give it to the kids to practice.
Dasha, where do you get this material from? This was from the slide. This was from the
Yeah,
the link that you sent for the webinar.
Yeah,
So-
the one you shared on the chat actually.
we provided this to you in the link.